Welcome to Inside the Mavs. Mavs insider Kevin Gray of 105 through the Fan, as always, joined by my partner Grant Asseth of MavsBasketball.com, covering all things Mavs for Sports Illustrated. You can find Grant on Twitter at Grant Asseth. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you give a 5-star rating, write a review while you're there. Got a lot to get to unexpectedly on this Monday. Before we go any further, Grant, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking forward to having some interesting things to talk about for sure.
Yeah, so definitely interesting things to talk about in Mavs land, because as we were just a few weeks away from the NBA draft, obviously there's news there, but at the same time, the bombshell that Shams Charania, Chris Haynes, Adrian Wojnarowski, and others today dropped when it came to Kyrie Irving, because I find it ironic, Grant, as we jump into our conversation today, that Kyrie, who jumped on IG Live not too long ago, said, hey, keep my name out your mouth. I don't want you guys talking about me and my free agency decision. And then we get news today that Kyrie, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic, says, quote, sources say that Kyrie Irving has reached out to Lakers star LeBron James. Okay, no harm, no foul there so far. Okay, no problem. In attempts to see if James would come to Dallas. Irving is a free agent this offseason. Now, Chris Haynes took it in even a step further, saying that Kyrie Irving desires for the Mavericks to explore acquiring Lakers star LeBron James to form a big three with Luka Doncic in Dallas, and that apparently, according to Haynes, the Mavericks inquired about possibly trading for LeBron James at the trade deadline. Now, of course, the Lakers were able to remake themselves by making some moves that eventually led them to the Western Conference Final. But Grant, I just find all of this to be kind of wild. And I said before the show started, I didn't have Kyrie Irving reaching out to LeBron James to try to form a big three in Dallas on my 2023 NBA bingo card. What was your reaction to this news, obviously, when it came to Kyrie reportedly reaching out to LeBron to see if he wants to come to Dallas to play with Luka and Kyrie?
Yeah, I think obviously there's like a lot to unpack when you kind of evaluate, what, a certain sort of, report could mean. How it impacts like a player's perspective, a team's perspective. And I feel like in Kyrie's instance, he's been linked to the Lakers a lot. He kind of indirectly addressed that, I feel like, with the Instagram Live, because it was almost like overtaking conference finals coverage instead of focusing on that. Like right when game 3 hit, the buzzer sounded, it was like, all right, Lakers off season time. But I feel like in general, this sort of report, I feel like it kind of just shows that, Kyrie, I feel like wants to maximize, obviously like his contract in free agency, and the Lakers are probably, like based off their restrictions with like, who they could send out in a trade, all the moving parts that be required. I don't feel like he like just a guess, like it seems like he understands that that's not going to come from the Lakers. So the Mavericks hold his bird rights. It would make, personally for him, the most financial sense to remain with the Mavericks, re-sign, and try to bring someone else, with him to Dallas. But, that gets into the whole obstacles of like, what trade assets do the Mavericks have? What contracts would another team have to take? All those sort of things. And then like, would the Lakers want to trade LeBron? And then how interested is LeBron in joining the Mavericks? Because that wasn't necessarily a part of it. And, the level of interest impacts a lot. If he's very interested, what could he do to manufacture leverage? Like what's even the potential there? And then if he's not that interested, then it's like, it's not, it's kind of a challenging hurdle to kind of climb for the Mavs to pull that off.
It just is fascinating on so many levels, because you look at LeBron James's contract with the Los Angeles Lakers going into this upcoming season, nearly $47 million. He does have a player option in the 2024-25 season of over $50 million, for the Los Angeles Lakers. And for me, it said a lot of things with Kyrie Irving with this report based on what Shams Charania is saying here. For me, as you were mentioning, Kyrie wants to maximize his financial ability here. The Mavericks can offer him the most money. We know that he can be offered a 5-year, $272 million contract. That's number one, and just reaffirms that based on what he wants to see. And the Lakers would have to pretty much move on from everyone to even get close to a kind of salary that Kyrie maybe want to be enticed to come to Los Angeles. We've heard Brian Windhorst of ESPN and others talking about the numbers that the Lakers could get to around $35 million. And that still would be somewhat of a pay cut, quote unquote, for Kyrie to move on to go play with Los Angeles. The other part for me that I think is interesting here is, and we've heard different iterations of it based off of how Kyrie Irving has had his relationship with LeBron James. It sounds like Kyrie wants to play with LeBron James in some capacity. Now, how he does that and how much he'll get paid in order to do so, that's another question. But it sounds like there's a clear desire here to play alongside LeBron James, even with LeBron going to be 39 at the beginning, or I should say at the end of 2023. The other part here I find to be fascinating is this. Kyrie Irving looking at his situation based on what he could make, the team that he's trying to possibly stay with, and thinking that LeBron, Luka, and Kyrie, no matter how far-fetched it may be, would be the triumvirate that could help the Mavericks win a championship, even with LeBron James being 39 years of age at the time, at the end of 2023. I just find that combination to be extremely fascinating. And to your point, I'm not sure Kyrie understands how this works, because if you were to bring LeBron James to the Mavericks, you're essentially having to gut the franchise that you're trying to stay with, while also trying to bring along a guy that's going to be getting paid a max salary along with you. And the way that this is going in the collective bargaining agreement, it's very difficult to have three superstars on your roster commanding a max salary and field a competitive roster. There's just so many moving parts here that I think even for Kyrie, he may have missed the point here and what was trying to ultimately happen here. Because here's the question I want to ask you. Who does this ultimately serve for this kind of report to be put out here? Because it came out of nowhere, obviously a bombshell. But in your opinion, who does a report like this ultimately serve, and what is trying to be accomplished with some information like this being put out here?
Yeah, I think in general, the more that Kyrie Irving is linked to wanting to play with LeBron, the better it is for, Kyrie's, leverage ahead of free agency. I think, the threat of wanting to play with him at least brings another team that could at least make a big offer, not like the max, but at least like a big contract, that could at least be like, all right, well, if you don't give me what I want, I'll just, go to the Lakers, like something like that. It's a little challenging to fully appreciate that sort of threat when there's real limits to what the Lakers are going to be able to offer, as we've touched on a couple times. In general, like that $30 to $35 million range, depending on the moves that they make, because their supporting cast players play really well, like Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, like they're gonna have come with a cost. So I think it would probably benefit Kyrie the most for that type of report. And I think it honestly really just depends as well on like how, like LeBron's perspective, like how eager is he, like how like much of a desire is there to play with Kyrie again? Because if there's we obviously don't know fully all the details because it's just like a report that came out, but if LeBron is really motivated to play with Kyrie, then that could be an actual threat. But if it's like one of those situations where NBA players try to get other NBA players to play with them all the time, like for example, like I listened to Paul George's podcast with DeMar DeRozan. It's not a perfect comparison, but when he was available and the Lakers were linked to him, and the Clippers were linked to him as well. Paul George was saying that, I want you to come to LA, and they're like, yeah, let's make it happen. And then he didn't even know when he did it, like how little of an offer DeMar could get. And then he said, I had to tell him in person, I said, my bad. I didn't realize, I didn't realize what I was asking you to do. If I would have known the numbers, I wouldn't have come with you like that, because I felt like that might have devalued how you may think I view you as a player or whatever, because that's like, big reduction in his salary. But yeah, I think like, the ideas are always great, but the logistics with the NBA, especially with the collective bargaining agreement becoming more restrictive and like, penalizing for teams that are spending a lot of money over that second apron, it's even more challenging. Like, I don't even think like people who cover the league have a great grasp of it. There's probably people who work for teams that are learning as well. Like I wouldn't expect like the player to dive into the the PDF files of
Yeah.
the CBA for sure. So it might be an interesting sort of thing to unpack closer to free agency.
Yeah, there's still a lot of us trying to get a grip around what the collective bargaining agreement means, how much more punitive it is going to be going forward for teams trying to keep multiple superstars. It's seriously, we were talking about, who this serves the most, and you started to touch on it with Kyrie. This is clearly an opening salvo to say, look, there are things here in play that I'm thinking about. And by me getting some of this out here, reportedly, the Mavericks can start to have an idea. Okay, this is what Kyrie is starting to think a little bit. And hopefully that communication and the lines of communication remain open between the Mavericks and Kyrie to ensure that they're all on the same page here. But if I'm LeBron James, this is low key kind of a passive aggressive way to tell Rob Pelinka and the Lakers organization, hey, there's a dude out here who I have a good relationship with who wants me to come play with him. Hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if you found a way to bring the guy that wants to play with me over here to Los Angeles? And then that way, me, AD, and Kyrie can get this thing going in LA, even with the kinds of things that they'll have to do financially to make that happen. It sounds like from both sides, from Kyrie, where there'd be a leverage play to let the Mavericks know what he's kind of thinking. In some ways, this could be for LeBron James to tell the Lakers, there's a guy that wants to play with me. Can we make it happen here in Los Angeles? Because I don't think LeBron James wants to come to Dallas to play basketball. I don't think at this stage in his career, he's got his whole entertainment company in Los Angeles. He's got a lot of things outside of basketball that makes sense for it to remain in Los Angeles. That to me, the more likelihood is that Kyrie would try to force his way to Los Angeles versus LeBron James trying to do so and force his way to Dallas at this stage in his career. That to me is what kind of some of this is meaning for me as well. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think with Bronny James getting set to play for USC, that's like
exactly
even more like because if the guy is making statements that I want to play with my son when he reaches the NBA, if he's playing for USC up the up the whatever road like not too far out from you, I highly doubt he would like jump ship to go like be super motivated to do that. That would make little sense based off all the patterns that he's kind of shown for how much he values being around Bronny's basketball career. And I think in general, the Lakers comments, at the end of the season, the exit interviews, Rob Pelinka, a lot of times like these comments can end up aging poorly, if you will. But like I remember the comments were mostly like, we love our young core. We're going to do everything we can to keep them, things of that nature. But like in general, if LeBron wants something, I think that's going to have to be taken into account if you're the Lakers, because I mean he's already won a championship for you, and the time is running out for him to compete at a high level. You saw in the Western Conference Finals. I think he is in a tougher position to reach those higher gears, especially longer in a playoff run. So I feel like he genuinely would want or need to have that other perimeter star is kind of the read off, like, his sort of like push for Kyrie. And, I think it's fair for the Lakers to have hesitancy for that because, they just tried to do that recently with Russell Westbrook. And, it's not the exact basketball fit for sure, but the salary cap implications of, another huge contract when it's even harder to navigate the rest of the roster is very important to kind of weigh. But also the fact that like Russell Westbrook didn't really miss games. Like Kyrie, has some injury stuff that'll come up, and he has an injury history. So if Kyrie may be a better basketball fit because of the shooting and all that stuff, that he kind of cohesively play off of, LeBron and AD, you still have that issue of, all three of those guys have to be available enough to compete together and be a high enough seed and, to avoid the play-in and to, be ready for the playoffs. But it already was a problem enough to have AD and LeBron healthy at the same time as it is. So there's just like a lot of like conflicting elements, I feel like, from everyone involved. Like LeBron and Kyrie seem to want to play together. Like they've put all that, like a lot of things out there. And then it's just like the logistics of it are very challenging, and it's going to be very like a lot of things that you like one person wants. Like LeBron clearly wants to be in Los Angeles. There's a lot of reasons for that, so it's like there's just a lot of like conflicting forces, if you will. Like it's just there's a reason why there's a lot of ideas that sound great on the surface, but then they don't happen in the NBA.
For sure. And the other thought that came to my mind as you were going through some of that is, before we kind of get to even what a possible scenario of LeBron James coming to Dallas would look like, is maybe this is Kyrie a little bit testing the limits of the Mavericks' willingness to see how far they'll go with him, which is weird because they can offer him more money and more years than anybody. So it's not like if the Mavericks are in a position that they'll feel backed into a corner because they'll say, okay, Kyrie, we'll just offer you all the money in all the years. Are you going to take it or not? Because we have the best offer for you. But I just wonder why Kyrie would even have this floated out here if it wasn't for a leverage play to try to find his way to Los Angeles, given the fact that now it is clearly out there that these two, it sounds like, wants to play together. But for him, maybe testing the limits of this front office to see how willing are they going and how far are they willing to go to meet whatever he's looking for in terms of his demands, quote unquote, despite the fact that they can offer him whatever they want to based on them having his bird rights. I just find the whole thing to be kind of interesting given the timing of it, who he's wanting to engage this with, and why he would want to put this out or reportedly put this out right now as it stands.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with the timing is that I believe the adjustment is that to the collective bargaining agreement that Kyrie and the Mavs are able to start talking about a contract. Like basically, I believe it's the day after the NBA Finals.
Yeah, the day after the finals. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think starting to put a couple things out in the the universe, if you will, about portraying what you want or foreshadowing is probably like a wise idea for those players that are going to have those conversations with their teams about returning, and especially for like kind of the higher end, like the top free agent kind of options out there, like James Harden. He's also like both sides. Like there's a lot of layers to James Harden's free agency that have already been like kind of surfaced. And Kyrie, I think many people will consider him, the second best free agent out there, behind James Harden. So like they set the market for the most part, and a lot of things wait for them to happen. So I think getting those things out there sooner definitely benefits those star free agents, especially if they're not shoe-ins for like everything that they want. There's when you're negotiating, depending on what however that's going to go for James Harden or Kyrie Irving for where they want to go. I think there's naturally going to be people who would view their situations just in a vacuum and be like a 5-year max, 4-year max, 3-year max. Like that could be tough, depending on the specifics of that. You're not going to just go 5-year max, like sign the paper
right off the top, 5 years, 272, right off top. Exactly.
Unless it's like that, unless you're a superstar like that, who's got those circumstances in your favor, it does benefit you to get your leverage sort of going in advance, especially with the conversations now being eligible to take place much sooner for your current team than in the past.
So let's play ball with it then. If Kyrie wants LeBron James in Dallas, the machinations in trying to even put this together are just mind-boggling to begin with. But let's try to workshop an idea that somehow gets LeBron James to Dallas based off of the salary cap constraints, the draft capital that the Mavericks have available to them and what could be attractive to the Los Angeles Lakers to even make this happen. Because I'll just throw out a few players just to see if we can put this together. At minimum, the number 10 pick goes. Tim Hardaway Jr. goes. Maxi Kleber probably has to go too. And maybe you can convince the Lakers to take Davis Bertans' contract. In fact, you would probably have to have them take that contract in order for all the money to match up between Tim Hardaway, Maxi Kleber, and also Davis Bertans, and then the number 10 overall pick. And low key, you might even have to throw Josh Green in there to make it happen too, to make it young for a young, attractive player to come along with that group to get LeBron James in that sort of way. Working shop something like that together. What would you say to something like that?
Yeah, I think it definitely would require, like, I believe he's about to make like $47 million.
That's right.
LeBron is next season. So yeah, you definitely would have to include Tim Hardaway. You would probably have to include either, I think, two of like Maxi Kleber, Reggie Bullock, or Davis Bertans. I think you could probably get to the number without Davis Bertans. Actually, I'm gonna, off the top of my head, I don't want to say that without fully knowing.
But Bullock has guaranteed his $10.5 million at the end of the month. So between Hardaway, Bullock, and Kleber, you get close there if you decide to utilize those three in that way.
Yeah, it looks like you get to $39.3 million with those three players. And then I guess you also have like some of those smaller contracts to work with. Like theoretically, you could put in JaVale McGee. Mm-hmm. Maybe that could get you that gets you to $45.1 million. Then you only have a $1.8 million difference. I would imagine, as you said, you likely would have to include young talent to entice the Lakers even more, since, I mean, honestly, it's very hard to even like evaluate what the trade value of a guy who's like 39 years old or will turn 39 next season. And it's like, because like I feel like a lot of people, when you start talking about it, you're like, yeah, LeBron James is worth a lot. And then it's like, well, obviously, but like no matter how old, like while he's playing at a high level, it's like, but then it's like, wait a minute, am I going
to give all of that up for a 39-year-old? Exactly. Yeah.
It's almost at that point, it's very challenging to kind of navigate. Like if you can get off of some of these contracts in the process, it makes it a little more appealing. But yeah, like if you're depleting all your picks and all your young players that are like eligible to be moved this offseason, then like that's really tough. That's a lot of turnaround to compete immedially for a title, because then you're gonna, like, I guess you could probably say, like, I know Justin Holiday, for example, like a veteran minimum guy, he did say that he was enticed by playing with Kyrie and Luka. So I would imagine that you can get some veterans that would sign for those types of contracts. Like, you can't fill out a whole roster with those guys.
Right.
But, like, I'm sure you can, like, with the appeal of LeBron especially, I'm sure, that could at least be an extra benefit of a trade of that nature. But, yeah, they would have to definitely be extremely creative, regardless of whatever trade package would be the one that gets it done, if there even is one that gets it done. Because there's a lot of unfortunate layers whenever you're evaluating that one, for sure.
I love the fact, for somebody who covers the league as well and as deep as you do, you're even like, look, man, I don't know how in the hell this gets put together based on all the things that are, complicating factors here based on what LeBron's asking for. It's funny because as we're playing NBA 2K with this whole LeBron thing, I think about Bill Simmons and what he had to say a few months ago about the idea of LeBron coming. Oh, by the way, yeah, they'll get Draymond Green to come along too, which is like, okay, let's just even walk down that road just real quick. LeBron, Kyrie, Luka, and Draymond Green all on the same thing. Basically, those are the only four players you can afford at that point to put out on the floor. So you're going to play 4-on-5 every night, because that's all that you can really afford if you're trying to put together a roster in that way.
Yeah, it's very complicated. The only way I can see even remotely, which is not even like a real, like, I don't know how realistic it is. It's probably very low realistic probabilities, but like as crazy as it sounds, the buyout, that word, buyout, that's the only instance I can think of where you can like really piece together like some crazy team like that. But I guess it comes back to the whole like part of the the ideas that sound great, early in the off season, whether you're the player or the team, before you unpack all the layers. Like for LeBron, let's say he was just absolutely hell bent on going to the Mavericks, and like he threatened retirement. Like let's say that he would have, if he actually did retire, he would have to sign the formal papers, and the Lakers would have to sign the papers, submit it to the league office, and he would have to be out for a whole year, or the board of governors would all have to agree to to allow him to play again. So it's like I know it sounds great to play with someone you want to play with, but it's like these leverage like options. It's like those are like nuclear options in a sense. It's like how hell bent are you on playing with Kyrie Irving? Like regardless of what uniform you wear, like there's a lot of challenges regardless, whichever way you look at it, for sure.
Now, the only other thing that I thought of in some of this as the day has kind of gone on is, okay, let's play ball here. If Kyrie says, look, and this is just in his own mind, if I come back and I play with the Dallas Mavericks for a year, I sign a 1-year deal, and I line myself up with LeBron James, who would play the final year of that deal that he has with the Lakers, because as I mentioned, after this upcoming season, the next year is a player option, that the both of them hit free agency together, and then they want to go somewhere together and play, or they go and re-up. LeBron re-ups with Los Angeles and Kyrie comes along with him in that particular scenario. Again, we're talking about at that point a player who will be 40 years old at the end of 2024 signing up to play with a guy who would be 32 years old going into that upcoming season. I just find it far-fetched that LeBron and Kyrie would line up a plan together and say, hey, don't worry about it. We'll wait a year. You go back to Dallas and play for a year there. I'll play my final year in LA, and then we'll work it out after the year is over with. Even that scenario doesn't seem very likely given how old LeBron is going to be and what Kyrie is looking to do in terms of maximizing his financial potential, even if that was a concocted idea that he may have to try to play with LeBron James.
Yeah, that it would definitely require a level of I guess you could say collaboration and creativity. Yeah, it would definitely require something like that. I feel like unless one day the Lakers woke up and were like, LeBron, thank you so much for everything you've done. Well, what do you want to have happen? And then
oh boy,
like that's the only set of circumstances for my look at it, with the way the trade packages would probably look like. But that's not how the world works. Like obviously, like you have all of those jersey sales, you have all the TV draw. I know they're the Lakers regardless, but like still, you don't let someone like LeBron go. Like that's
unless he's just forcing himself out. Unless he's,
yeah,
I want to get out of here, find a way to get me where I want to go in that way.
You would probably have, if he was truly hell bent on it, you would have to probably stomach all of the passive aggressive media comments and all the stuff. But then it's like, we're making a lot of money, so it is what it is. Like that's probably the reality that they'd be in. I just think in general, like the Russell Westbrook experiment with them, it just challenges the whole idea, because if they never done that and they don't have the fallback to be like, look, LeBron, like we traded for Russell Westbrook, it did not work, and look how much better we were when we moved on from his salary, a similar salary that what Kyrie, I guess not similar for the Lakers, but just a big contract. We filled our roster out with balanced it out with quite a few complementary pieces, and we made it to a Western Conference Finals. Respectfully, we can't do that. That's the way it kind of reads, because I mean that's if you look at how the outcomes have played out, it's very challenging to commit to that 3-star model again. All those, as we said, all those players, they have availability concerns, usually, so that's even more challenging. So I think, yeah, it's a lot of layers that I felt like conflict with each other, as we've been saying. So I think overall, it'll be interesting to see what other reports we get closer to the free agency period. But yeah, that this one was definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, and the last part I'll say on this, when it comes to this conversation, is look, if you're the Mavericks, do you even want something like this based off of what Kyrie is asking for? Because we mentioned LeBron going to be 39 at the end of this year, and you're trying to put together a future that's around Luka Doncic, and you're looking at Kyrie and LeBron together. Even if you went all in for this upcoming season, the way that things are shaping out in the Western Conference, I don't even know even with what they would have in those three will be enough to get past a team like Denver, who is as deep as they are. And we've seen how good they've been in these playoffs, even though they're now tied at one apiece, with the Miami Heat. So there's just so many complicating factors to all of this. I just found the idea that Kyrie putting this out here, one, to be kind of odd, but two, based on what you were saying earlier in terms of the timing, these teams can start talking to their own free agents once the NBA finals are over with. So we're going to start getting maybe some of these kinds of reports about what teams and players are starting to think about based on their situations with their own free agents going forward. And Kyrie was like, I'm bored. It's Monday. Let's just drop a bombshell and just see the NBA react based off of, what I've got to say about it. Before we end our show today, a couple of housekeeping items. So we saw that Frank Vogel is the new head coach now of the Phoenix Suns. He gets that job to coach Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, which then started to whittle down some of the assistant coach possibilities for the Dallas Mavericks as they're looking for a new assistant coach after Greg St. Jean departed from this franchise. James Borrego, former coach for the Charlotte Hornets, he's joining the Pelicans as part of their coaching staff. We also saw Terry Stotts, who used to be a former Dallas Mavericks assistant, former head coach in the league as well. He is going to Milwaukee to join their staff in Milwaukee there. So, in Adrian Griffin's staff. So there's some names that are starting to kind of whittle down in terms of who you may see fit with the with the Dallas Mavericks. And Mark Stein reporting that apparently, as we start to look at some of these names, a name that hasn't been on the sideline as a coach or otherwise in the last, 15 years, yet you hear him every single year because he's on the broadcast of the NBA Finals. Mark Stein mentioning Jeff Van Gundy as a possibility that the Mavericks may be interested in to gauge his interest in the job. What are your thoughts on Jeff Van Gundy being a interested candidate for the Dallas Mavericks?
Yeah, I think honestly, in general, I think my first thought is like what we were talking about before we started. Like, why would you want to leave TV, especially such like a big TV role, to be an assistant? Like, not even like a head coach, but like an assistant coach. Like, unless there's like significant like compensation, like what some of these teams have started to do lately. Like, well, I guess not some teams, but like the Phoenix Suns, like they threw money at David Fizdale to leave his job as the assistant GM of the Jazz,
and make Kevin Young the Kevin Young the highest paid assistant coach in the league right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like unless you're like gonna get a deal like that, but it's like 15 years out of the league. I with all due respect to the way people pay coaches and all, like I don't really know how that one works specifically. So it's like, but like like that that would be a very weird like outcome. Like I don't know. It's like turning down money to do something that's more stressful for you, and like travel all like 41 games, whatever it is for the broadcast. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's definitely an interesting. It's another weird storyline that kind of popped out today, for sure.
The other name Stein mentioning, Jeff Hornacek. That might be a name, an offensive-minded head coach, or offensive-minded assistant that could join Jason Kidd's staff. That name sounds a little more realistic based on what we are seeing happening out there. What would you think of a Jeff Hornacek fit for Dallas based off of his career and his credentials?
Yeah, I think based off like, especially with what's out there, still available, I think that would be a, definitely a more fitting option. I think, he spent time with quite a few different types of teams as well. I think, having someone who's, experienced like him, even with like, I think he was recently with, Houston, on their staff. And so, he's done like the younger team, he's done the older team, like the competitive team. So I think like having just like someone who's kind of seeing, a bit of everything, I think that would be, a helpful thing to have as like a top assistant. Especially like unless like some name out of nowhere who might have been available this offseason, like Doc Rivers. Like I don't see that really being an option. I feel like he's more of the type of coach with his track record to sit out and wait for a better opportunity than to join someone's assistant coaching staff. I feel like so like that kind of even narrows down your options more. There's like so many that are off the board. Like that happened pretty fast as well too. Like I feel like we had a list, like a workshop list, and then it's like, oh wow, one guy's left.
That's
like,
right.
Like I think, in general, I think that would be a good option for what's out there for sure.
Well, the Mavericks had no shortage of weird news throughout the course of the weekend. And today, of course, we will see what happens with the Mavericks and their free agency decisions that they have, more specifically, of course, with Kyrie Irving. Graham, before we get out of here, tell the folks where they can find you, what you're doing these days, sir.
Yeah, for sure. You can find all my the written content on DallasBasketball.com, which is on the SI.com. You can find me on Twitter, Grant Afseth. We'll have a lot of stuff before the draft free agency. Especially there's more interesting storylines that keep popping out. It will be interesting off season for sure. The next month, very very fun.
Yeah, including the NBA draft. It's happening toward the end of the month as well. So you can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. That's it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Thank Grant, as always, for his insights here on Inside the Mavs. Thank you to everyone who continues to download and support the podcast. Really tremendous response to it. Really appreciate the support of all you listening and checking out the podcast. Make sure you give it a 5-star rating, write a review for the podcast while you're there, and make sure you tell your friends and family to download Inside the Mavs. We'll be back a little bit later on this week talking more Mavs basketball, especially as we get closer to the NBA draft, unless Kyrie decides he wants to get out on IG Live or break some other news that he wants us to talk about here on Inside the Mavs. Until then, for Grant Afseth, my name is Kevin Gray. We'll talk to you later. Peace.